right, so we're going to talk today a little bit about Social Security, especially for a dependent adult. My name is Lisa Habza. I am the Family to Family Health Information Outreach Coordinator at PTI Nebraska. If you have any questions during the presentation and you're afraid you're going to forget, I suggest you put them in the chat. I kind of want to go through the information quickly and then save time for at the end for question and answers. I did have a lot of people request this be recorded and so they can watch it later. I think a very important part to start out with that a lot of people get confused is the acronyms that come along with Social Security. They use SSA, SSDI, SSI. They use them all interchangeably, and a lot of people don't have an understanding of that. SSA stands for the Social Security Administration. So that is not necessarily like a program that you are applying for. The two programs would be SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, and then SSI, Supplemental Security Income. A lot of people get very confused by these two acronyms and what they mean. So at a glance, we're going to discuss the differences. So SSDI, the disability insurance, provides benefits to disabled persons based on their prior earnings and work history. So for a lot of us who have traditional jobs and are having Social Security taken out of our paycheck to save for when we're no longer able to work. And we receive that amount based on our work history, and we'll call them work credits. That'll be how it's decided how much we get. There is a waiting period of 5 months after you become disabled before you can collect SSDI payments, and your maximum benefit is going to be based off what income you earned prior to your disability. What a lot of people don't understand when we're going to apply for Social Security for a disabled dependent adult is that first we're going to have to apply for SSDI and be declared not eligible for that program first. So a lot of the families that reach out to me are like, I got this letter in the mail. My son or daughter was denied for SSI. No, it's just a step in the process. You're denied SSDI first. Most of the individuals that we're applying for don't have that work history or have those work credits and will be automatically denied. When we're filling out the application, it will ask if you are denied SSDI, do you want to be considered for SSI? And for our dependent adults, yes, we want to apply for SSI, which is Supplemental Security Income. And that provides benefits based on a financial need, not based on your work history. These are a lot of times individuals that have never worked. They're for the population that we serve or are supporting. Individuals that are not going to be able to hold full-time gainful employment. There is no waiting period for these SSI payments. Benefits begin the first day of the month that you file on your application. And right now in 2023, the maximum amount of benefits that a person will receive for SSI is $914 a month. The way I understand it, that will go up in 2024. I don't have the information on the exact amount. Nebraska has one of the highest approval rates of all the states in the nation for approving SSI. These are just some statistics based on our resident population, the percentage of population on SSI, the percentage of population on SSDI, the average monthly payments. So you can see that there's a big difference in somebody who has work credits and they're going to earn that $1,036.92 versus the average SSI recipient with no work history. The average payment is $488.14. We're going to get into why a lot of our individuals aren't receiving their full SSI payment benefit based on their living arrangements and how we fill out applications. When we file for disability in Nebraska or we file for SSI, the disability benefits are the same in any other state. There are 3 different ways that you can apply for SSI. I will be sending out my tips and tricks sheet about tips and tricks for our population, our dependent adult population. Typically, filing online is not our best option. There's a lot of level of understanding of how that application should be filled out correctly when you're filling it out for a third party, and what information needs to be attained. So from personal experience, I also have a 20-year-old daughter with developmental and physical disabilities that I had to apply for SSI for as well. And so I was your little guinea pig, and I went ahead and applied online for SSI. My application came back as incomplete, although I think I'm an expert. So there you go. It came back incomplete. It was filed wrong and did not get moved along the right channels appropriately. So my wait time was extended. I had to make numerous phone calls to the SSA, the Social Security Administration, to get my application moving along and all my little bits and pieces that I did not include or I filled out incorrectly fixed. My tips and tricks sheet say to apply over the telephone. This is, I want to say, a surefire way to fill out the application correctly and fully. You're going to call the customer service number. It's on this presentation, which I'll send out afterwards as well as on my tips and trick sheet. You call and you just say, hey, I need to go ahead and file for Social Security disability benefits for my dependent adult, son or daughter, guardian, whomever you're helping. Chances are the individual on the phone will say, hey, just go online and fill that out. You know, they're short-staffed and overworked just like everybody else. So they're trying to make things easier on themselves, but it's not always, easiest is not always best. So just be really insistent that you would like to make that appointment to go over the application over the telephone. I've sat with many parents and guardians and they'll say, well, we're scheduling like 6 months out, you know, kind of saying, you know, it'll be faster if you do it online. Then they come back and say, oh, well, actually, we have an appointment December 5th. Again, it's just a tactic to push it off. Just be really insistent that you would like to fill out the application over the phone. And it is absolutely a benefit that you're able to utilize. So they'll say in person at the Social Security office. They do really discourage this since COVID. You would need an appointment to go in and fill it out. This is going to be mostly reserved for family members that maybe have a disability themselves, maybe a language barrier, some sort of special circumstance. So I would use the in-person as our last option. It's really important to remember that when we're applying for our individuals that we apply after their 18th birthday. 18 is the age of majority for the federal government. I know it's super confusing because in the state of Nebraska, our age of majority is 19. But we can go ahead and apply for Social Security benefits anytime after their 18th birthday. I'll just warn you, if you fill out the application or start the application online before that date of birth, they're going to take into account all of the family's income and resources. So parents, guardians, anybody in the household, they're going to take all that information, even if you get approved later and the individual is already 18. You can call ahead of time and schedule that appointment for after their birthday. That would be okay. But just don't start the application before. A lot of people ask me, what information do I need for the application? I'll tell you, I sat down to fill out the application online. I had no idea of the questions that they were going to ask me. I probably got up like 15, 16 times going and searching through my files, looking for different things. And it was just a real mess. I will attach a document when I send this email out after this presentation to include this information. It's also in this presentation, but all the things that you need to have on hand to be able to answer their questions and get the application done as quickly and as fully as possible. Phone numbers, contact phone numbers for doctors, specialists, therapists, counselors, hospital, all means all. So anything that's related to their disability. Now, if something is not related to the individual's disability, it is not important to include it. So a dentist office, if they don't have significant oral deformities or something that is creating a huge medical complication that would be needed for services. School information, a lot of people ask if they have to have the IEPs and MDTs. You do not need to have those on hand. You're just going to want the school and the school district's information, name, address, and phone number of where Social Security can reach out to get those documents. A little bit about income and resources. Anything that's attached to that individual Social Security number, Social Security will find. So just because you don't tell them about it doesn't mean it won't come up in their investigation. So it's really important to disclose all that information up front because it'll make the process go a little bit faster. So any bank accounts, savings bonds, trust, any property that that child's name is on or their Social Security number is associated with needs to be disclosed and considered as income or as a resource. Otherwise, there's just a bunch more hoops to jump through afterwards. I won't go through a bunch of the other ones because it's pretty common sense. So your financial resources and disability are the two different levels of determination. When you're being determined eligible for SSI, they're going to first go through your financials and your resources to make sure that you are financially eligible. They're going to ask you about any cash, bank accounts, real estate, stocks, bonds, some life insurance. It depends on right now if it has a cash value and can be turned in for cash. I always just let them know about it. They can ask for the paperwork and determine if it's a resource or not. All of our resources must be less than $2,000 for an individual. Most of our dependent adults are not married. A lot of them do not have dependents, and those resources are $2,000 collectively. If you pass and you work through the financial and you become financially eligible, you'll then go on to disability determination. Disability determination is found for somebody that is 65 or older. If they're totally or partially blind, they have a medical condition that keeps them from working and is expected to last at least 1 year or result in death. And you cannot do work, so the individual cannot work and engage in substantial gainful activity. So that's your SGA because of your medical condition. So this does not mean that you can't hold any job, that you can't make any money, but it has to be, they call it gainful activity. So you have to be earning a wage that you would be able to support yourself. Most of our individuals do not. They work part-time jobs, they're inconsistent, maybe they're contract work, they don't have benefits. All those things are not going to be taken into account and count against them as disability determination. So when we're talking about our resources, especially like the financial piece of it, there are two really important, I don't know what you would call them. two ways to save and protect your money for the future. And this can be really done anytime. So this can be done well before your 18th birthday, preparing to have your resources in order to be able to qualify based on financial need. One is a special needs trust. A lot of families, parents, I'll use myself as an example again. I have a life insurance policy. My life insurance, if it were be paid out to my daughter Noelle and she were to inherit, we'll just use $100,000 upon my passing, the state would consider that a resource until that money was expended. And so she would not qualify for SSI payments and maybe some other state payments. But if I create a third party special needs trust that her mother's life insurance will pay out to, that money is not a resource to her because it's not left to her as an individual. It's left to a trust that has specific language that it is not to be used for her medical care. It's not to be used for her primary means of housing. I can dictate how that money should be spent because that money is mine. It wasn't earned by her. I'm giving her that money to be used for extra things. So the money in the special needs trust is funded by a third party, a lot of time by a family member, a parent's life insurance policy, and it's going to be used to cushion Social Security through the rest of their life. Another really cool thing is an Enable savings account. This is kind of like your ordinary checking savings account, or maybe like a 401k investment opportunity for an individual that wants to save for the future. It's established by the person with a disability, or it can be set up by another qualifying person. I can send out some general information on Enable accounts. So you can see what those qualifying people are. Normally it's a parent, a sibling, a grandparent, a guardian, and it kind of goes just list down in order. This account is a little bit different because like our special needs trust is funded by a third party. This Enable savings account is actually funded by the account holder. It can also be funded by family and friends, but this is a place to put maybe our extra SSI money. Maybe we have a small part-time job that we need to save for future expenses, maybe retirement, maybe larger purchases, maybe a car, a house, a computer, maybe a big trip. I have a coworker that wanted to, her son wanted to go on a trip to Disneyland, and we all know how expensive that is. They would never be able to save for an experience like that under the limitations of the $2,000 in resources that they're allowed for SSI. So this Enable savings account is just a safe place for money to be held, to be saved for those larger expenses. I did list the annual contributions as $17,000. So that's the most you can put in 1 year. So that's why a lot of times people have to have both the special needs trust and an Enable savings account, because like my life insurance would pay out too much at one time for the Enable savings account to absorb. And the Enable savings account also has a balance limit of $100,000. So that's kind of why the two programs work hand in hand. We're going to kind of run through these fairly quickly. The information will be sent out to you so you can review a little bit more closely. But this talks about a little bit deeper dive into how people are determined for disability determination. I listed out the functional domains. And this just gives us a better understanding of how Social Security is using the information from the schools and from the doctor's offices to determine that they're not going to be able to hold that gainful employment. So they're going to look at diagnosis, notes, MDTs, IEPs to see how the individual can acquire and use information that's presented to them. How they can attend and complete tasks, how they interact and relate with each other, how they move about and manipulate objects, about how they're able to care for themselves and how they're able to keep up their health and their physical well-being. So it's not necessarily just a list of diagnoses. When you get into adult determination, there's a little bit more of a list that sometimes you can have a qualifying diagnosis that you would automatically qualify for Social Security. Unfortunately, a lot of people with an intellectual disability, maybe autism, that there's such a wide spectrum that that is not a qualifying event or an issue. So this is just going to break up those different topics. So acquiring and using information. So this is going to break it down a little bit further about the things that they look for. I'm not going to go read through these. There's just some general information that I thought would be really handy for you. A lot of times this information is really good to have in your back pocket when you're working with the schools on IEP goals and transition goals. A lot of times the schools just don't need that information to present or paint a picture of the individual to get the needs met in the school setting. But we need to prepare that paperwork to show the need for adult benefits for Social Security or some of the state benefits. So this is taking a little bit deeper dive into like what caring for oneself looks like. You know, do they seek out activities of interest, or are they just going to sit in their room all day and become depressed and not a productive member of society? You know, just a whole bunch of things. So we talked a little bit about the SSA, Social Security Administration, adult listing of impairments. These are kind of the different disorders and how they're broken up. So I could say that my daughter had a respiratory disorder. On the SSA website, I'd be able to click on respiratory disorder and it would break it down a little bit further. And I could see if my individual specifically met one of those diagnoses. I'll use my daughter as an example. My daughter is trached, so she has a tracheostomy tube to help her breathe. I can't say for sure that that's one of the automatic qualifying things. I'm pretty sure it wasn't, because she didn't have, she's a conglomeration of a whole bunch of different things, and not one of her diagnoses made her eligible for Social Security. So she had to go through the whole process. I tell all the families that I work with, no matter how well you fill out the application, no matter how well you answer their questions about the skills and abilities of the person you're supporting, that you should just expect to be denied, especially at least once the first time. This is just a personal opinion. You know, I think a lot of times the information is just not there and supported in our paperwork, that we need to maybe have a little bit more testing done, a little bit more information to paint a good picture. That's why it's really important to stay up to date on the testing within the school district, maybe getting testing done through your physician's office. Although it's not really going to change the way we deal with them on a day-to-day basis, it's becoming increasingly important to paint a good picture of our individual for adult services. When you're denied, the first level of appeal is super easy. You could just shoot me an email. You can get on the SSA website. There's a document. It's basically like, I don't agree with your denial. Please look at it again, and you sign your name. So they're going to take another look, and it doesn't require any additional information. They're just going to look, another person's going to take a look and see what that information looks like. This is just kind of about appeal hearings, about how long things take in Nebraska compared to the national average. I'd say Nebraska is pretty right on track. Our case approval rate is a little bit higher than the national average, but we do pretty good around here. I talked about the different levels of appeal. So there's 4 levels of appeal. And like I said, that reconsideration form, I listed the form out. You can just kind of Google it, print it out, super simple. Check the box that says I don't agree, sign it and mail it in. Our next step would be, if we still were denied, is to request a hearing by an administrative law judge. I listed the form that you would fill out for that as well. A lot of times that information is included in the letters from Social Security, but a lot of times that information is buried. And just reading through all that legal mumbo jumbo is a lot for us as parents, caregivers, guardians to absorb and be able to decipher through. So I've listed the forms right out here. I'd say normally the first 2 levels of appeals, a family or a family member, a lay guardian, could handle on their own. When you start getting past the second level of appeals is when maybe you want to start seeking out some legal representation and help, because the next one is review by the appeals council, which there's another form. You could fill out the form by yourself, but a lot of times maybe somebody with a little bit more education and expertise would be able to help you navigate these last 2 appeal processes. So the review by the appeals council and then the federal court of review. Again, if you needed help, PTI is able to help you navigate those forms. We're not legal representation by any means, but we do house some legal representation lists that are not necessarily our recommendation, but they've been given to us by other families in the state of Nebraska that have used them and found them helpful. This is just going back to some general application tips. In the beginning of the application, we talked about how in Nebraska, the average Social Security payment was only $488. Sometimes my little tips on this presentation and in my tips and tricks sheet that I'll send out will help you get closer to that $914. So when you're doing the application, remember that you're filling it out only for the individual that you serve, even if they live in your house. When it asked where they live, it was very easy for me to put in a house with mom, and that's what I did because that's where she lives. I didn't realize that by not charging her room and board and not renting a room for her meant that I would be giving her an in-kind donation of free room and board that would reduce her Social Security payment. So just like a lot of other residents in Nebraska, we were receiving a lesser amount because SSI or SSA was considering room and board a donation for Noel. So as long as the individual is 18, you can start charging for room and board in your house. I have some instructions on how you configure the appropriate amount of rent for room and board. There's 2 different methodologies you can use that are approved by Social Security. It's pretty easy. A lot of times from families, it's like, how do I charge them room and board? They're not receiving Social Security and they don't have a job. Social Security doesn't really care if they're not paying their rent for their room and board. At that point, it's a tenant-landlord agreement. And if you're not going to evict your person you're supporting for non-payment of rent, that's kind of your problem. I should tell you that Social Security is going to pay out should you be approved from the date of the application or the first day of the month following the application. So if you were charging them room and board and we applied in January and their non-payment for January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, because it took them 6 to 9 months to approve you, it will be that they should pay you the back rent from the amount that is paid, especially if you said you were charging them that. As long as they're not receiving any assistance from the federal or state government to help them pay for their room and board, that money, you don't need any receipts or any proof that that money was received. Like I said, it's a tenant landlord agreement. And if you don't want to kick them out on the street, then don't. And we already talked about including absolutely everything associated with the Social Security number, because they will find out. And it's okay. You don't need to lie and be like, oh, I'm over the $2,000, so I'm going to fib and maybe they won't find it. They will find it. That's just where you can reach out to me, Easter Seals. There's a lot of different programs, and we can help, maybe start that Enable account and move money around to where it should be. So it's protected and the resources are all in the order for approval. Worst comes to worst, you just got to go spend a bunch of money. We're going to talk just a little bit about a representative payee. This question will be asked on the application. A representative payee is a person or an organization authorized by Social Security to receive monthly benefits on the behalf of the beneficiary. I'll use myself again as an example. I am my daughter Noelle's representative payee. So her Social Security payments are made out to me for the benefit of Noelle. So her account is a restricted account at the bank. She has no rights or authority to that. She can't make deposits or take money out. I'm totally in charge of that. So I make sure all of her bills are paid. I give her her spending money, and the representative payee is only for Social Security. So that's not going to take any part of, like, if you're their guardian or a conservator, that's totally different. Representative payee is only in regards to their Social Security benefits. Representative payee is appointed when the person is legally incompetent to manage their money. A lot of times this is determined by the court or guardianship. I do not have guardianship over my daughter, and it is not determined by a court, but I could fill out the paperwork and provide the information that it is not in her best interest to manage her money herself. She's just mentally incapable of managing payments, paying her rent, making sure her bills are paid, and only spending her budgeted amount on food, friends, and social activities. So I help her with that. She also does have a lot of physical disabilities that just make it harder for her to maybe do online banking. She doesn't drive, so she'd have a hard time getting to the bank. And a lot of times a representative payee, or all the time, is appointed to somebody under the age of 18. A lot of people are confused and think because they're receiving Social Security that they cannot work, or that working will impact their Social Security, which is absolutely, not true to a certain extent. They have lots of incentives and supports to encourage people to work. I have a bunch of them listed out here, and almost always, if you worked with a benefits planner, there is always a benefit to work. Normally financially, just based on all the incentives and supports, financially, you're going to come out ahead. It's good for your mental health to have a job. A lot of times Social Security is not just the financial piece, not just the $914 a month that you receive. A lot of times people are dependent on that for, approval for Medicaid to have their medical benefits covered, or maybe they need supportive employment to be able to hang on to that job. And Social Security is giving them the supports that they need to be employed. So it's not the $914 that they need. It's those other incentive and supports. Benefits planning, we don't do that here at PTI, but I have great resources to point you out to different agencies in the community. Benefits planning, those people work with you to understand the benefits received and the impact of employment, so you have the right balance of work versus benefits. They just tell you about all the incentives that there are and the benefits to work. And then you can make informed choices about work and career advancement. So you keep your benefits, you're able to work, and you're able to get the best of both worlds, I guess is what I'd say. I do have 3 agencies listed here that have been referred to PTI Nebraska that helps with those planning resources. We've given a couple presentations with a couple of these area agencies. If you want more information on benefits planning, I can get that for you. Otherwise, there's the contact information to reach out for on that. A lot of people reach out to me at PTI Nebraska and ask what SSI can be used for. Monthly payments are used for day-to-day needs for food and shelter, medical, dental care that are not paid by Medicaid or insurance, any personal needs such as clothing and recreation, and anything that they don't spend, deposit in that Enable account to save, for maybe a bigger purchase. Back pay and large payments have a little bit different rules, but pretty much the same, their current needs, food, shelter, something to improve their quality of living or their daily living conditions. So maybe it's a piece of equipment that's not covered by insurance or Medicaid, but would improve their life at home. Again, you could special purchases. I don't know that anybody's received a large enough sum to buy a home, but maybe a cheap car or some furniture. Again, just save all of your receipts. And if you need more specific information, I can guide you to the SSA website that provides a little bit more detail. There are field offices in Nebraska. I listed all of those on this presentation. Again, don't just stop by and visit. A lot of them are closed to the public. You would need to call and make an appointment to go in and visit. They're pretty strict about that. This is just my contact information. Should you have any questions about Social Security, the process, anything.